Today it's my pleasure to host another episode of the Beyond Consulting podcast. And I have with me Caris Marsh. She is head of strategy for the capital markets line at Ocorian. Caris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Caris, maybe from where are you joining us today, and how has your week been so far?
Oh, lovely. So I'm joining you from currently sunny London, yes, my week is going pretty well so far. I'm looking forward to a weekend away with my family this weekend, so that's certainly keeping my spirits up.
Yeah, looking good. And it's a pleasure to have you. I mean, what I really like, on the one hand, you're working now in the financial service industry, but also you have been a consultant in your life before, at one of the big four companies. And we want to explore today a bit the financial service industry and also how consultants play a role in there. So I'd say it's a perfect fit. And start with a very easy question, maybe. How did you find your way into the financial services world?
Well, it sounds like an easy question. Not sure how easy it really is. But so I started my career at EY Consulting, and I left EY to run a healthcare technology startup business. So I actually ran my own business for 3 or 4 years, took that from, the first customer through a couple of rounds of funding and into £1 million of annual recurring revenue. And then I was looking for my next challenge, after that, and actually found my way into financial services kind of by chance, because I was really looking for an organization that was going through transformation, that was potentially kind of private equity backed or similar, and Ocorian is backed by a private equity company called Inflection. So it was much, and I was also looking for a role that would be pivotal in transformation. So it was much more about the role and where the organization was on its journey, and it happened to be in financial services, and I was relatively agnostic about which industry I ended up in. So perhaps like some of the people who listen to your podcast, I am a little bit more of a generalist, but kind of found my way in financial services through through the role here at Ocorian, really.
And when you say transformation, financial services, I mean, a lot of people have maybe, some basic understanding of what it is. But if we dive a bit deeper, I mean, what is it that Ocorian does? What is it that the capital market line basically does? Can you maybe give us a bit of a flavor what the day-to-day business as head of strategy for that looks like, and what the business is about?
Yeah, of course. So Ocorian is a corporate fund and trust administration business. What that actually means is, so we work for across Ocorian, we work for both asset owners, so corporates and high net worth individuals, but also asset managers, investors and issuers, credit funds, private equity sponsors, etc. And we take on the setup and administration of their investment structures and entities, and we manage fiduciary and regulatory responsibilities kind of on their behalf. We may advise them on regulatory responsibilities as well. From a capital markets perspective, obviously, our business line is primarily focused on fiduciary services for any sort of capital markets securitized transaction and structure, and we also do debt services as well for any kind of for private and public debt structures.
So if you it sounds like a very broad split. Are there some examples, specific examples, how you serve your customers with the services, especially in the capital markets line business?
Yeah, so for example, we act as a loan agent on lots of private equity sponsorship deals. So we would administer and securitize that loan, and ensure that it complies with all fiduciary responsibilities.
Yeah. So you would basically help PEs in that sense to secure the loans and comply with all the regulatory topics.
More administer than the administrative process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, I mean, that is highly specialized. Yeah. And of course, you work with a lot of clients together. Yeah. Bring it back to the role of the head of strategy. Yeah. How can we imagine the daily life of a head of strategy in a financial service company like yours?
Well, I guess no 2 days are quite the same. But I guess the thing about my role is it's both strategy and business implementation. So I'm responsible for making sure we have both a clear strategy. So, what's our sort of long-term strategy over the next 3 years and helping our defining that and supporting our leadership team to define the specifics of that. And then how do we take that strategy through to execution? So actually working on very tactical product development plans or go-to-market plans for how we actually do that, and then indeed how we will measure the success of that strategy as well. Mm-hmm. So my role kind of spans both of those elements.
So I guess you're working a lot on the trends then also of the financial service industry, making them happen and applying them to your business. What would you say are the key trends that we see in the moment that are shaping your industry?
And I don't think at the macro level, I don't think it's dissimilar to many other industries, right? So AI and automation as enablers, which is I'm sure everybody is seeing something similar there. From our perspective, certainly streamlining process and enhancing sort of human talent, especially for administrative services, because a lot of what we do is very administrative. So the ability for AI and automation to support there. Mm-hmm. I think we're certainly seeing now the kind of having a very tech-enabled platform and solution is kind of a hygiene factor, right? And it's now how we sort of go beyond that and do more with AI and automation. Mm-hmm. Data and transparency in our industry is really key. We organizations, both us and our clients, deal with huge amounts of data, and both accuracy and transparency are really important. So how do we facilitate better data sharing between organizations? Mm-hmm. How do we ensure that our data is accurate and up to date, and those elements as well? And I think there is a lot of focus and concern on that within the industry, both from our clients as well, right? So how do they ensure that the data they get is accurate?
Right.
I think regulation as a theme is always shaping our industry. It's constantly changing, ever creating challenges and opportunities, both kind of quite broad regulations, so pan-European type regulations, but also very jurisdiction specific for us as well is key.
And is that something that your clients sort of bring to you? So some, clients come with there's a new regulation, some ideas emerge how you best now adopt the business models and the practices, or is that something where you basically say, look, we follow it and we then bring that to our clients as a service company?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a regulatory and compliance practice in Ocorian, so that obviously that is. And a lot of what we do depends on us being up to date with the latest regulation across all of our service lines, including capital markets. So yeah, we would absolutely be taking that to clients. But there are also instances where clients come to us and say, what's your view on this new regulation that's coming down the track, and does that change how we deal with X, Y, Z? Yeah. So yeah, both sides for sure.
So if you look across your industry, I mean, keeping those trends in mind, where do you see companies are not capitalizing as much as they could on those trends, and what makes it probably also difficult for them to do it?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I'm not sure that. I think there are always more opportunities. I feel like there are there is definitely more opportunity in our industry on both the automation, AI and data management side of things. I think we are. There are lots of things that we do that we can innovate further. So I would say it's not that we're kind of not capitalizing on those opportunities, but I do think the scope is just enormous, right? In terms of what we can do there.
So, and I mean, it's broad fields, right? AI, data, and of course, like everyone seems to be working on it. Almost every company I speak with names this as key trends, and so it's in that sense also not surprising. But of course, companies need to address it. It might be also challenging. Do you see a role of consultants in that process, facilitating or accelerating those processes on how AI use cases maybe can come in companies, how data can come into it? How do you see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're not organizations like ours, aren't experts in AI and automation typically. So certainly we will often look to the experience of external parties to help us understand where those opportunities are and understand the technologies that are out there that we perhaps aren't aware of. Right, there are kind of vast amounts of these other technologies available. And I think it probably depends. It sort of depends where we're looking and where in the organisation. But yeah, for sure, there's an opportunity for consultants in that space. Yeah.
And that is that I love it, of course. That is opportunity. Now, what I find super interesting. I mean, you mentioned AI, you mentioned data. Yeah, there is potential for consultants. Now that we have a world of increasing specialization, and AI algorithms are maybe one phase of that. When I think back in my consulting times, there were a lot of generalist consultants out there that worked on multiple clients, multiple industries, bringing process know-how basically into these organizations. Where I'd say like that is a traditional, classic generalist consultant. And now, if you think about the AI, the data, the challenges that your industry is dealing with, do you see consulting roles becoming increasingly specialized? Or is there still a need for generalist consultants?
I think partially, kind of broadly, yes. And I think the one of the themes that I think is sort of clear to me is increasingly discerning and demanding buyers. So when it comes to consulting, I'm always looking for a specialist in some sense. So whether that be, maybe I am, there are areas where we might look for what you would call sort of a traditional strategy generalist. So for example, perhaps we're looking to identify expansion opportunities in specific areas and we want to understand a bit more about a market or something. We might do some market scan. I might, maybe I would use a consultancy for that. And that might be kind of more a traditional, what you would call a traditional sort of strategy consulting project. But I am actually looking for an industry specialist or a market specialist in that sense. So I think there is always a requirement for some sort of form of specialism. And then I certainly think when it comes to more sort of delivery focused execution projects, really you're looking for somebody who's either done it before or got kind of an accelerator of some kind, framework, a technology, the experience in that space. And I guess the other thing I would sort of say is that, in an environment where consulting continues to become more and more challenging, right? I think we've seen in the news Big Four partner layoffs, and I suspect a vast proportion of that it comes from their consulting businesses, because I think that's where the place where it is challenging for people, because people are looking for specialists, people are looking for kind of more specialized more specialized advice and expertise. Because really what you're paying for with consulting is the expertise, right?
And so that brings me to a thought. So now you have large strategy houses, and I understand you bring them in for projects to screen the market, to help you with these more generalist topics. Now, of course, they can bring also various areas of expertise, various consultants with different specializations. But sometimes also maybe smaller tasks could be done by just one specialist. How do you go about thinking, like in what cases do we actually need a complete strategy house versus I could do maybe a smaller project with freelancers? Maybe it takes a bit longer or so, but also, of course, it might be a lot more cost effective. How do you think about those two different options in the market?
Yeah, I think like anything, you're thinking about what you're trying to achieve, how quickly you want to go at it, and what kind of resource you might have available. I think it probably depends on a few factors. So number one, how much of it is going to be a fully outsourced piece of work versus a collaboration with some existing in-house resources. So that might be where you kind of, maybe you get a specialist freelancer to sort of augment an existing internal team, for example. So, we need a solution architect who understands these types of technologies in this project, for example, and then a freelancer is quite an attractive proposition. Or it might be that you kind of want to get a package of work that where where the benefit of being able to tap into a network, the organization, as opposed to the individuals on the project, is key. So, as perhaps a sort of strategy or market entry piece of work where you would say, well, if I get McKinsey instead of an individual, then I get the individuals on the project plus everyone who they can speak to internally and the resources they have available to them as well. So it's much more about the nature of the project than I think that's the key thing you're considering, and kind of how fast you want to go and how much you want them to be embedded in your team, really.
And building on that, so I recently had a chat where someone mentioned, of course, now increasingly over the last years, what you saw with traditional consulting houses and clients demanding that also is that you see something some people call value-based pricing, but even simpler put, like if you do a great job, you get a bit more money. If you don't do a good job, you probably get some lower fees. And of course, the difficulty in consulting is always, how do you measure success on a consulting project? Some areas where you can do it very easily, of course, is in sales projects or cost-saving projects where you can say, okay, we saved whatever amount X, and of that you get a certain percentage as an upside if you really can make it happen. Do you see, and that, of course, is something where the traditional strategy houses, I would say, can deliver really well, because they have the project oversight, they have all the people, and that is harder for individual freelancers to deliver. Do you see some trends like this also in your industry?
I'm smiling because when I was in consulting 10 years ago, we were talking about being paid for the value we create, rather than, and actually, no, I sort of don't. I haven't seen a shift towards being paid for the value that's really created in the way that I had thought we would see it when I was back in consulting talking about it 10 years ago. Or in the way that I thought, people would come. I was sort of, expecting that people would come with a very different pricing model for many projects. And I haven't seen that in the way that I thought we perhaps would.
Why is that? I mean,
but I think to some, I agree with what you're saying, though. It's much more difficult for an individual to do that than it is for an organization, for sure, because you've got to have the right structure and frameworks in place to get it right, and that takes some thought and resources, right? So I do agree, but I, I'm kind of smiling because if you'd have spoken to me 10 years ago and said, "What's consulting going to look like in 10 years' time?" I'd have predicted that that this would be much more prevalent than it actually is, or than I've seen it.
Do you have any hypothesis why that hasn't changed or went to that value-based payments or contracts so much?
I think my hypothesis would be a combination of it's quite challenging to do it. It's challenging, and clients aren't necessarily asking for it.
Okay. So
that's my hypothesis.
It's interesting, and I think also it's a big risk. I think it's something also that would always require a really trustful relationship also.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If you're kind of in a procurement mode and you have 5 consultancies and some do it, even though maybe it's not quite clear how in the end you calculate the KPIs, but they do it just to kind of, get the assignment.
Yeah, I think it's higher risk on both sides as well. And I think organizations have been probably a bit risk averse to doing it, and I'm sure there are some horror stories out there. People who've
yeah, I'm pretty sure also there are great stories out there where it worked, and people were really
I'm sure happy. On both sides.
Now you said already if we had spoken 10 years ago, you would have predicted, that Model 2 have changed a bit more. But if we look into the future now with the trends with consulting and also like the strategy house on the one hand, the freelancers on the other hand, what would you think would be different if you speak in 10 years from now on in the future?
Well, I'm not sure that my predictions are really worth much on this basis. But look, I think I believe there will still be a place for consulting. If I split this into kind of strategy and execution, right? Mm-hmm. From a strategy perspective, I think there will be a place for organizations to help consultants to help organizations to answer questions that they don't have the skill set and the expertise immediately available to answer. I think yes, AI will kind of start to improve some of that, but I just haven't seen it so far make a dent on the human input when it comes to understanding the nuances of an industry or of a market. And that's where the experience of having worked in it and therefore that element will still be relevant. So I think it will be longer than 10 years before we don't need that anymore. And then I think from an execution perspective, I think perhaps increasingly organizations bringing some form of accelerator, whether that is a proprietary technology or a tool that they have that will help kind of sort of jumpstart organizations on a particular journey. So for example, like if we're building sort of new data warehouses or dashboards or something, we want to take our data now and we want to generate insights for sales purposes, or we want to use our data in better ways, rather than hiring a group of people who can come and build it for you. You hire somebody because they have technologies and tools that will kind of get you there quicker alongside the people. So again, sort of more tech enabled type services, I think, on the delivery, certainly on the delivery consulting side of things. That's so let's see in 10 years time.
It's really interesting. So if I say, look, there is still a need for strategy houses going forward, even though maybe not as much, but there is. And on the other hand, also, I would think
as long as they continue to sort of evolve with some of these market trends, for sure.
And there is also what you highlight, a clear specialization required, which might also go hand in hand with that tech-enabled services. So you cannot just come and say, look, choose a tool, but you need to suggest one and also know it. Not just very superficial, but really in depth, so you can see how it fits into the organization. If there would be one piece of advice that you would give to consultants from your perspective, what would it be?
Freelancers or organizations?
Or we can split it. If you have two, we can take two.
Well, I think from a freelancer perspective, if you're selling yourself as an individual, you know, I mean, it's never been more important than it's never been more critical than now to make sure that you have a very clear you have a very clear kind of competency and brand. I think knowing which types of roles you will be most suited for, and being able to kind of find those in the kind of broad spectrum of stuff that's available is really key, right? So being able to match the right resources to the right role. So as an individual, I think you've got to know what it is, which industry it is that you're capable in, and which competencies it is you're capable in. And it doesn't have to be financial services. It can be, you know, broader than that, tech enabled, B2B, you know, it create your own sort of thing. But I think you have to know where you're a specialist. I don't think you can, you know, I sort of agree with the theory that you sort of marketing yourself as a generalist is challenging. So focus on your brand. And then I think also a bit of focus on the types of projects and situations where you'll be most successful going into an organization versus, you know, versus them needing something a bit more comprehensive.
Says Caris Marsh from Ocorian. Caris, thank you very much for being on the show today. It's been my pleasure. Really great discussion. You're heading off into the weekend probably soon?
A little bit more left of the week before we head off into the weekend. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for joining today.
Thank you. Pleasure speaking to you, Christian. Thank you very much.
Bye.